Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give it just a minute for everyone to join us this morning. Go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat while we're waiting to get started, where you're from, how old you are. If you have any exciting things to share about your own conservation work, we would love to hear from you in the chat. We're really excited to have you today. I hope that some of us joining today also joined us last weekend for session 1. And if you did miss session 1, you can go ahead and watch that recording on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. But yeah, so if you would like to introduce yourselves in the chat, we'll get started in just a moment. All right, once again, thank you everyone so much for joining us. We're so excited to hear you. I'm so glad to see some familiar faces and familiar names in the chat from last session. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. And it's really wonderful to see so many different people from so many different regions of the world and so many different age ranges as well. It just makes me really, really excited for the conversation that we're going to have today. So I am just going to go through the little schedule we have for today. I'm going to introduce myself in a second and our lovely facilitator and guest speaker. We're going to have his presentation and then time for Q&A at the end. So as we're going through the presentation today, if you do have any questions, feel free to send them in that Q&A Zoom feature, because we'll definitely try to get to all of our questions at the end. And then we also have a couple of announcements. So getting started, my name is Laura Johnson. I live in Long Beach, California. I'm the youth program supervisor for the Ocean Project, and I am the lead coordinator for the youth advocacy training series. So all of the emails that you've gotten from me trying to register and asking any questions, definitely feel free to shoot me an email at youth@theoceanproject.org. Next up, I'm going to introduce our lovely session facilitator, Bailey Ritter, and wonderful educator, environmentalist, and good friend of mine. So I will pass it off to Bailey so we can get started.
Hi, everyone. I am so stoked and so honored to be here with you all today. Laura and I like to joke that I'm like the Ryan Seacrest of like ocean conservation webinars. So that's really the role that I shall be performing today. Quite frankly, I'm just a fan. I'm so honored to continue to be doing this work. I've worked with the Ocean Project since I was in high school and working full-time after college, and now am the Youth Initiative Advisor, and just can't get enough of this work, enough of these young conservation heroes that we get to meet with and talk with during these sessions. And that's first and foremost our presenter who's joining us today. When Laura and I were brainstorming these first couple of sessions, we had an idea of what, the first and second and third, what the progression of the things that we wanted to share with all of you, things, tips and tricks that mentors of ours have shared with us along the way. And, when we were outlining this session, we really wanted to have something interactive and give you all a chance to deep dive and take time to understand your why, your conservation mission. Any advocate in this space will tell you having that why is critical to your endurance in this space. Without that why, without that grounding of why you do, what do you care about, what is all of this for, it can get easy to get lost and feel isolated and feel, lonely in this movement. And when we were thinking of speakers, literally only one person came to mind, and that is Joe Wilkins. He is, amongst so many other things, a World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council alumni. an ecologist, a nature campaigner, and just honestly has his thumb on the pulse of what's happening globally, not only in the 30 by 30 movement, so the movement to protect 30% of our planet by 2030, but the biodiversity protection movements around the world, the change-making movements around the world. And there's no one better who can sort of explain his why and help you all find your why than Joe. So I don't want to steal the show. I'm Ryan. Remember, I'm not the Katy Perry. We're using our American Idol references. So turning it over to Joe, and thank you, Joe, for taking your time and your Saturday evening to do this. We're so stoked and so honored to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I'm coming in from a very, very sunny Wales in the United Kingdom. As you can probably tell by my shoulder, keeps hitting on the sunshine. So I'm hoping the weather is good wherever everyone is watching from as well. Yeah, I was really, really honored to be asked to do this session. Going to start by saying I am in no means an expert on campaign advocacy and organizing. So this is going to be as much a learning experience for me, and hopefully people will share their own experiences. And a lot of this work, or a lot of the presentation, is going to be based on just my experience and also the lessons I've learned, but also spoken to a few friends in preparation and people who I consider to be, effective campaigners and advocates, and how their tips, or something that they'd wish they'd known earlier in their career. So I'm gonna just share screen, hopefully, which will work, and fingers crossed. Sorry, my computer is a little slow. The joy of living in a rural place is internet connection can be quite slow. Laura and Bailey, are you able to see my screen full now? Great. So yeah, as I mentioned, this session is going to be all about effective organizing or campaign organizing. Organizing encompasses such a breadth of things when it comes to conservation. So I'm hoping whatever you're working on at the moment or in the future, this will have some relevance to what you're working on. And just a little bit, as I mentioned, I work a lot currently with youth organizations. So Reserve the Youth Land Trust, which you might have heard of. Last year, or 2021, we established the world's first fully youth-funded nature reserve. So that was a campaign and a half to organize something that had never really been done before. So a lot of my lessons will come from that one. I'm also head of campaigns at UK's for Nature, which is focusing on policy change right here in the UK. So a slightly different angle, but again, so many lessons to be learned. Something hot off the press is I've recently started a community here in Wales to explore how rights of nature could look here in Wales. There's a real global push for recognizing sort of the rights of nature to exist rather than just as a tool for human well-being. So I'm exploring what that looks like here in Wales. And so if anybody is joining from Wales, please reach out, because I'm always looking for people to get involved in this movement. And it's actually one of my key takeaways, which we'll get to in a little bit, but please do reach out. And then I also do some advising on ocean stuff, but also on biodiversity in general. And I just thought I'd put some lovely pictures here of me when I was younger, kind of a little bit about my conservation why. I was really fortunate to have some very cool nature experiences growing up. And I recognize that is, a privilege that I was afforded living in such a rural place. But I'm a big ocean lover, as you can probably tell. That's why I'm here. Haven't been scuba diving in about 4 or 5 years, so I really need to get back into it at some point. But yeah, a little bit of an overview. This session's going to be about an hour. I'm hopefully going to talk and drone on as little as possible. As Laura and Bailey will probably attest to, I can speak for Wales, probably for the UK. So please do put stuff in the chat. I'm not sure in terms of, functionality of raising hands, whatever, but just please ask as many questions, and Bailey and Laura are going to be sort of monitoring that just throughout. Just wanted to put that out there. And feel free to, ask for not challenge me, but to, ask for clarification if something doesn't make any sense. But then we're going to go into a bit of a discovering your conservation why, which is going to be a simple kind of introduction. Then the second part, we're actually going to explore your mission and vision. So you might not have heard of mission statements and vision statements, but I find this a really useful way to think about campaigning and organizing. So hopefully it will find it'll be useful for you guys as well, whatever you might be working on. And then the third bit, which is actually going to be the presentation part, is some tips that I've learned along the way. So hopefully we're going to have 2 questions now in the polls. So if you can access the poll, yeah, it's just popped up now. In all of these, there are no right or wrong answers. It's just, I want to kind of, when we're exploring your conservation why, we don't always sit down and have a think about why we're doing this. And I think that is such an important time to spend. Even if you spend a day just sat thinking, why am I doing this? Where is this drive coming from? Do I feel that I have to act, or do I act because I want to? And both are valid. And you might argue that in this day, we have to act, but it's always nice to think and talk to ourselves, because we don't do that enough, in my opinion. We kind of barrel down with projects, we go ahead, and sometimes we forget to actually look within a little bit. And that at the heart of it, organizing is all about people coming together. And if people can't communicate how they're feeling, then the movements don't become effective. But so this one is just, do you feel like you must act? And I think pretty convincingly, yes, people feel they need to act. And I think that's a pretty valid response given the current situation around the world. Hopefully the next question we can just jump to. That was the simpler one. I find this a difficult question to ask. And it's, are you motivated mainly by hope for a better future or fear of a worse one? And please be completely honest here, because I think we all want to think that we're hoping for a better future, but for many people around the world, that's not a luxury. And for some people, it's just not possible. You know, it is fear that drives us, and both are extremely powerful drivers, but they can also impact how we communicate, how we organize. So I just wanted to ask this one, and I'll give you a little bit of time to think about this one, because it's not an easy question to answer and does require a little bit of soul searching, I guess, about why we're actually doing this. And at the moment, it seems pretty evenly split, slightly towards fear of a worse one. And again, this is not a right or wrong. I'm not going to tell you that we should always be hopeful, because that's not healthy either. It's important that we always have a realistic view, and we'll get onto that in a little bit, but just wanted to put that out there, that do take time. There's so many other questions you could ask yourself. I'm sure there are lists out there of resources that we can probably find to send to people, but do take time to think about these stuff as well. But that's that question. I just wanted to put that out there as a starting point. Hopefully my slide. So with that in mind, we are going to go into the actual sort of workshop-y section of this presentation, and that's all about vision and mission. And the reason I was asking you about the future that you imagine, or the future that drives you, when we're talking about our vision, it is very the future we want to create. Like, that is the vision statement. I'm going to give you some examples of reserver ones that we use, so don't worry if this doesn't make sense when I'm just talking about it in this stuff. But the vision statement is very much, it's what's the future you want to create. What if you achieve your goals and you achieve your mission, what does the world look like? And that is a big question, and that requires thinking. I see people being like, oh yes, well, our vision is to stop climate change, or world without climate change. But you have to really think about, and something I'm going to go into a lot is being specific, being achievable, setting things that you really can tangible. So that we're going to get into that a little bit, but I just wanted to introduce them. And then the mission statement is what you actually are going to do. And you can think of it, we say it's like, it's your theory of change or your strategy condensed into 2 sentences, 2 or 3 sentences. The shorter, the better. It's that if you went to an elevator, if you're in a lift or an elevator and someone asked you, what does your project do? What does your campaign do? That's what you can give them. It's an elevator pitch, but even shorter. So on the next slide, we're actually going to have a go at this. So next slide is not like I practiced at all. And our next slide is, I actually wanted to say what our vision at Reserver is. So our vision, Reserver is a youth-led conservation charity. And And we've been working in Ecuador to set up the world's first youth-funded nature reserve, but we also do a lot of other work, generally just trying to get young people into conservation across the sphere, across the field, from policy through to on-the-ground research. So our vision is that we envision a world where young people inherit and help maintain a biodiverse planet. And that is the kind of vision for Reserva, because we're all about getting young people. And so we both want biodiversity to be protected. That's why we want to inherit a young world. But also we want to help maintain. We want young people to be in conservation, doing the actions, not waiting for, 50 years to be the leaders. Young people are in it today. So that's kind of covers both of what we want to do. We want to protect biodiversity and empower young people to do it. And then our mission is that we empower young people to make a measurable difference for threatened species through conservation, education, and storytelling. So it's high level. We don't go into detail of every specific project we do, but it's the strategy. It's that we're empowering young people. That's our target. We're making a measurable difference. So it's not just using voices. It's not just storytelling. It's actually having a measurable change. And then the conservation, education, storytelling are our pillars of work. So as it says, you got to find out why you're doing this, what you want to achieve, and then the mission is how are you going to go about it. So the next slide, hopefully, is we're actually going to do a little bit of a practice of this ourselves. Normally, we would do a bit of maybe some breakout rooms, but I know people are feeling a little bit fatigued of breakout rooms. I am anyway. So this is going to be very much a personal activity, but hopefully there'll be chances for people to share either in the chat or mainly through the chat, but please do let us know what you're doing. So Bailey and Laura, I'm also going to ask you to take part in this as well, because I know both of you have incredible ideas, so I'd love for you to both participate. But hopefully everyone has got maybe a piece of paper or notes, on phone, whatever. It is helpful to write or type, just because it's good to get your thoughts onto paper. So the first step is to ask you to think of a problem, something you'd like to change. And this can be something that you want to work on. It could be something that you're already working on. But my one advice for this activity is keep it relatively specific. Don't say the problem is climate change or the problem is biodiversity loss, just because that is huge. So think of something. It can be something in your area that like, is there a local river that is full of plastic pollution? Is there a marine protected area that needs actual, management? I find thinking local is quite a good way, because it helps you to be quite specific, but also think more generally. Is there one that I quite often use as an example is here in Wales, there's a massive problem with communication because not many conservation organizations use the Welsh language. And so that is a huge barrier to people in rural communities where it's predominantly Welsh speaking. So that's kind of a problem that I've identified and I'm trying to overcome. So I'm going to give everybody 3 minutes, just have a think. If it doesn't have to be, the problem you actually want to work on, just take some time to think, and actually what's in your local area, what's in your age group. Oh, Laura's even got a countdown clock on. It's like we prepped. But yeah, just take some time, and in 3 minutes, please do share. I'm going to ask everyone to just share in the chat what you've been working on, and also Bailey and Laura, I might ask you on mic to share what you've been thinking as well, if that's okay. Not to put you on the spot too much.
What, Joe? No, I'm just joking. I am so stoked.
And I will also have a go and try and come up with something new other than my already used example. So yeah, 3 minutes, and I'll either sing to you or we'll just have silence, but maybe I'll just keep it silent. Save my voice. Also, what I should add is if anybody wants to think via chat as well, that's also great. Like, please, if you're struggling with ideas, put put stuff in the chat. We've had some great things coming in, questions about specific things around history curriculums. So if you want to think out loud, use this as a sounding board as well during this 3 minutes. How are we doing for time, Laura? What's the stopwatch on?
We're like 2 seconds. Yeah, my timer is literally going off.
I mean, Zoom is doing a good job at cancelling out background noise then. Okay, so hopefully I can see in the chat some people are thinking out loud, which is great to see. And I'm sorry to hear about some of the problems that people are currently facing. So I'm just going to read some of the, well, maybe Laura or Bailey, would either of you like to go first as well and share out loud, you know, what's the problem that you identified?
Bailey, I'll let you go first.
Love. So I actually, I just have this week been working on my restructuring my organization, the one that I am the founder and director of in my hometown. I've been restructuring my mission statement, my mission and vision statement. So I'm like, I'm going to give it a try, see what you all think of my first draft. But so my mission statement is, the problem is everyone's collective. That's the name of my organization. Everyone's collective's mission is to help close the environmental education and action gap in rural communities. So not as detailed as all of yours, but something that is prevalent in where I come from is there students in my community only receive about 11 minutes of exposure to environmental education and environmental issues a year in classrooms. And so that is something that my organization specifically is looking to help alleviate. So yeah, give me a lot of love in the chat. I need boosted. No, just joking. Laura, what's yours?
I love this so much. I'm like literally getting chills just reading some of these in the chat. First of all, I just want to give everybody a little shout out. This is really incredible. Mine is, I know Joe said to kind of keep it more specific, but I still stayed a little broad. I said that I want to connect and engage with young people doing conservation work around the world. There are literally thousands of youth leaders working tirelessly to make the world a better place. And I feel really lucky that I get to do that during, as my job. Every day I get to be the Ocean Project Youth Advisory Council or person in charge of the World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council, and I get to supervise the Ocean Project Youth Initiative. And it just, doing stuff like this is what is a really big part of my mission statement. So I'm just really excited about this entire situation happening right now.
I know, I love hearing, well, I also love and hate. It's an equal part. I love hearing all the things that people are working on, but I also hate hearing about them because some of them are incredibly difficult, especially some of the ones related around, I guess, more societal issues and systemic issues. I think just reading the chat, Meggie, I think you mentioned, sort of history education and how that's quite a pertinent thing. So yeah, these ones are not easy to tackle at all, and I love hearing the breadth. The reason I suggested specific was just give it a go at specific, and then when you get better. But I know, Laura, you know what you're talking about. But now we're going to do a little bit of time just really drafting that mission statement. I know I can see in the chat some people have already done so, but just try and get it. If you've already had a go at drafting it, try and cut it down to 2 or 3 sentences. Make it really snappy so that people know exactly. In Bailey's case, everyone's collected. Cut it down to 2 or 3 sentences so you can say, "This is what we do. This is," and then we'll do this for 3 minutes, and then we'll come back, and then finally, it's the really fun one where everyone gets to envision their ideal world if this problem is solved, which is my favorite part, because thinking about the problems is not always the most positive aspect, but definitely thinking about the world you want is a great way to do it. So some suggestions that I have put here is, if you've identified the problem is, say, a curriculum change, think about what do you actually want to change about it? Who would you want to focus your efforts on? Is it that your project will be focusing on individual schools, or are you going to focus on local government who are responsible, or is it Department of Education? Think in terms of who you're also targeting, and then how you're going to work. Just to kind of go, just for examples, because I know this is a bit confusing, just to remind you, Reserve empowers young people, so that's who we're targeting, to make a measurable difference to threatened species and habitats. That's what we want to do. And then conservation, education, and storytelling is how we're going to do it. So those are the kind of key parts to take out of there. So yeah, maybe because a few people have already started, we'll go 2-3 minutes on this bit, and then we'll come back and do the fun bit, which I love. I love hearing about people's visions. So yeah, we'll go draft your mission, 2 minutes. And even if you just bullet point this point, don't worry about making it into a cohesive, nice sounding sentence. Even if you just answer these through bullet points, that's a great start to get going. So yeah, Laura, I don't know if I can get you timing again with your stopwatch. We'll do three minutes for that one. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, don't worry too much about grammar. I'm awful at grammar. Just focus on getting the content, then you can go away and spend time tidying it up. Just get these answers in. So yeah, hopefully you'll have fun on this bit and really think about what you would want to do to tackle it. And that's it. Yeah, I'll stop talking so I don't distract everybody for now. I know I said I'd be silent, but I really just have to love the breadth of topics being brought up here, everything from stigma against sharks to LGBTQ. I think this really goes to show that we're all here shared by either a love of the ocean or at least conservation, but the ways we're approaching that and the problems we want to fix is just endless in a way. Each one of us has an issue that we want to tackle and a way of tackling it. So I'm just very grateful, want to put out there for people for sharing all of this, and it's a really lovely, hopefully a lovely activity. But I'm loving just finding out how you're all trying to impact conservation in your own ways. Yeah, Laura, my heart is just, I always think when we think conservation, we just think biology, we just think on the ground, but there are so many elements to making it more accessible and more successful. But yeah, I'll let everyone get back. Oh, yeah, please just share in the chat because these are incredible. If at any point anybody wants like a sounding board, feel free to kind of send these to me or send it whoever. Like, I'm more than happy to, like, as I said at the start, I'm not an expert, but I'm more than happy to spend time listening to what people want to work on. And hopefully through all 4 sessions of this advocacy training, all pieces will start to come together. And just every time something comes through, I just can't help but stop to read it. It is loving hearing what you're all working on, and you're already pretty much there with mission statements. Just a couple of them you can maybe tidy up a little bit, shorten, make a bit snappier. But in terms of actual content, you're hitting it smack on. And then finally, we'll only do 2 minutes on this one because it's the shorter one. What's your vision? And what we try and do is keep it as relevant to your problem mission as possible. So with our vision statement, which is about inheriting and maintaining a healthy, a biodiverse planet, we have that key element that it's related to young people. It's not just saving biodiversity, it's that we want young people to be involved and on a biodiverse planet. So this one is difficult. This one, it's fun but difficult because it's easy to say, I want a happy planet or I want a healthy planet. But when you have to think what's your vision for your campaign organization, it's a bit more difficult. So we'll do 2 minutes and then we'll come back and hopefully share some lovely visions of what the world could be like if you tackle your issues. Bailey.
Yes, and maybe it might be helpful if you do want Joe to campaign or sort of a brainstorm any part of your mission, your vision, any of these statements with you, maybe put it in the Q&A box so you can see it, Joe can see it specifically and maybe can help sort of like workshop and go through a couple of them. So if you'd like any of that sort of assistance directly, yeah, throw those in the Q&A box so that we can see, and it doesn't even have to be complete, just a couple of things you're thinking through and maybe we can help workshop through that.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do 2 minutes on vision. I'm sure and then we'll come back together and then yeah, please do feel free to like drop it in. And then you've also got Laura and Bailey here who are also very experts. They are expert campaigners more so than me, but that would, whilst we're here and we're all together as well, so please don't feel like this is just the 3 of us. Like, I'm happy we can share stuff and get people's feedback if that's something that can be arranged. I'm sure there's a little something we can do to facilitate. And I'm going to go into like after this a little bit of like tips on organizing, and one of the big ones is collaboration. It is a big thing. You're not in it on your own. So, but we'll come to that in a minute. Let's just focus on vision of a world. And Bailey, I might start with you. What's your vision for it as well? Nice. Um, incredible. I wish we lived in this planet is my statement. But general advice would be with your vision statement, if you can bring it down, kind of keep it condensed. That would be my one thing from like general feedback is try and keep it to a sentence if you can. If it needs to go over to two, that's fine, but really make it these ones are trying to be as condensed because you'll have strategies, you'll have plans, you'll have frameworks, that you build into these, but these kind of problem, mission, vision, keep them short and snappy so that someone could read it and be like, wow, I get it. Bailey, what about you? What's yours?
Okay, so I started writing and I'm realizing these might be goals and not
Yeah.
I'm like, no, that seems like things I would also like imagining your vision, right? Can also be goal state. Those are goals, right? So I'll read the goals that I wrote. They're not so much envisioning a world, but just sort of the things that I hope to accomplish. So two major ones that I wrote, kind of going back to the mission I said earlier, is bridging the environmental education gap with programming that meets the realities, needs, and barriers of rural communities. And then second, empowering and equipping community members with tools and opportunities to take local and global action for a sustainable and abundant future. So it's more goals than sort of the vision, but I think the vision is sort of like implied of, we have this just sustainable and abundant future where traditionally marginalized or frontline communities have the resources, the tools, and the capital, to be a part of the solutions regarding their backyard. So that's sort of like the implied. So I guess
you could almost pull it into something, like I envision a world where, marginalized communities are equipped and empowered with the tools to make change in their local area. Like that could be like a perfect something like that, where it's just taking all of that, condensing it into one. It's not going to cover, the vision statement will never cover, everything you do. It's just overall, this is what I want. So in that case, it would be like, I envision a world where local communities are empowered and equipped to take action. Something like that.
Honestly, like Cosmos is wonderful in the chat to build sustainable environment and create a better living condition for all. Like, like that's sort of the dream, right? For us all.
And especially if your program is around education, anything like that, I've seen a lot of people saying like, we're envision a world where people and nature are connected, or things like that's very related to like education and those sorts of things. So this is difficult, and I should have said at the start, you're not going to leave this session with a fully formed mission and vision statement, but hopefully this has planted some seeds of work that you want to go further on. I can see that there is a question. How would I go about starting that process of getting my ideas out to my peers and community that will actually affect people or get people's attention? That's a very big question and a very good question. Hopefully I'll start to answer it in the next section a little bit, but I also know that coming up in the next few sessions, you also have stuff around comms and those sorts of aspects as well. So I'll maybe tackle that when we start when I just go on to the next couple of slides. But it's a really valid question, because it's all good having it up here and even on a piece of paper, but if you can't get it out there and get people engaged and buying in, then it can just sit there. So my advice would be broadly is you have to kind of apply. It's very situational. It's very local dependent. I think if anyone tries to say that there's whoever you're trying to target, that's how you have to tailor your communication. If you're trying to target young people, it's a very different target audience to business leaders. So that would be my advice. And that's something that I'll go into a little bit, is about the importance of really identifying who you're trying to target as well. And I just joined. Can someone explain what's going on? We did a little workshop on mission, vision, and problems. We're going to move on to the next section, but if you wanted to watch the recording at all, you're more than welcome to watch it back and take part, and I'm also happy to answer any questions. But yeah, hopefully people enjoyed that. Hopefully it was a good use of people's time, because I really enjoy this activity, and I think we've all got so many ideas and so many things we want to tackle. It's really nice to sometimes sit, plan. And that was only done in 10 minutes total. Like realistically, these things take a lot longer. Weeks, months, so don't worry if things aren't feeling fully formed. It's just, I find this a really good flow of bringing my ideas together. But next, now that we've kind of got this, we've identified a problem, we've drafted a mission statement, and we've envisioned a world that we want to live in, it's kind of, okay, great, but what next? Like, how do I actually come to implement it? And so this is just a quick study, a quick thing of our mission statement was about empowering young people. Normally, so we found a new species of frog on our site in Ecuador that's new to science, never been discovered before. And the scientists who found it said to Reserva, would you like to be in charge of naming it? Would you like to run the process of naming a frog? Because normally that is a huge fundraising opportunity, because normally the rights to name a species goes to a large donor, to a rich donor who funds however much money to name the species, and it's normally named after an idol or after something they love. But when they offered it to us, we realized that it wasn't in keeping with our mission to go out and let a rich donor name it, an older donor. How do we apply the mission, which is to empower young people, in this specific project? And that was that we came up with this kind of fun new species naming competition where we opened it up to people free of charge around the world to name a species of frog. And that came with full education resources. It came with full packs that people could use to read it, and it was done for different languages, different ages. And so yes, we missed out on the opportunity for a potential lump sum of money, but we empowered and stuck to our mission. And it was a tough decision because conservation money is limited. But what it did achieve, even though we didn't get that lump sum of money, this gentleman here in the corner was the environment minister for Ecuador. And he took note of this because it was a global competition about a frog in Ecuador. And so he's been working quite closely with us to actually work on government protection in the area. So it's just a case of there will always be kind of shiny objects that will always kind of think like, oh my gosh, I need that. But sometimes it is worth taking a step back and thinking about your mission, because your mission has been crafted carefully, and just being careful of mission drift, because it can look a little bit like you're shifting a lot. Just think, when something comes towards you, when a different barrier or a different project comes, how do I apply my mission to this circumstance, to this project? And it's just a great way of thinking. And mission statements, as it says here, it's okay to evolve. You can set one now, like Bailey, as you mentioned, 2 years you set up the organization, and now you're wanting to maybe have a bit of a shift. That's fine. You will probably shift a little bit, but the important thing is not to be erratic with shifting and respond and change in response to this, because if you've taken time to plan, your mission statement will hold, but it might evolve, but it shouldn't need drastic changing. And that's just something to point out, is that it can be really easy to want to take on every single issue, but it's not always feasible, which I'm kind of going to touch on a little bit. And these are my tips and tips from other organizers that I've learned and they've suggested along the way. So the first 4 are what I would like to call pillars of organizing, and then the final one are the SMART goals, which I think most people have heard about. But the first ones are the ones I really wanted to hammer in, is that your organizing has to be sustainable in itself. It is so easy to want to do everything. It's so easy to get burnt out in this space because we're dealing with big issues. We're dealing with quite often things not going our way, to be completely honest, in the conservation space. So I just wanted to say, and some suggestions is just have regular check-ins, have hobbies outside of conservation. This isn't specifically about how to make a successful campaign, but I think organizing encompasses a lot more than just the objectives and the goals that you want to achieve. There's also a whole how do you look after yourself and others in this? So planning was a big one that came up for being sustainable. Sit down, plan. Don't just constantly be like click, go, go, go. Have time to sit and plan is a big one. And easier said than done, but find some joy in the movement. There's always joy to be found in the movement. And I find it a lot in other people. Like this session, I'm finding so much joy just hearing about what everyone's working on. And the one that I didn't mention here, which is a little bit, is do try and develop friendships. I think it's quite easy for us to fall into spaces of just treating everyone as colleagues and as, other people. I'm not saying you're going to be best friends with every single person you meet, but just building that layer of personal connection can make this movement so much more sustainable than just thinking, I need to meet this person for a meeting. At the start of a meeting, ask how they're doing, ask how their dog is, like little things like that go a long way. And they may sound cheesy and you might say, Joe, you're rambling on about rubbish, but I have found that to be a really way of making things sustainable, is actually. And then it leads to the next one, which is teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. Many hands make light work. I'm sure whichever language people speak, there's an equivalent of that, but it is so true. You're never going to be able to do these things all alone because it's just not sustainable. It's just not healthy. So find team early, reach out to people, share the workload, use your strengths. If, Laura is an incredible graphic designer, but I hate that, well, I'm not, I'll hand that to Laura, but or I love to ramble on in a presentation, then that's, we can work that out. And it's so much easier because people find each other and find how to do it. So learn from one another. And you also have people to turn to when the going gets tough, and it will get tough at some point. So it's important to that. Accessible, I've named it accessible. It could also be inclusive. It could also be diverse. I named it accessible because it fits the acronym of STAR that I wanted to name. But ask yourself, who is in the room? Who needs to be in the room? Why aren't they in the room? These are just simple questions that, especially if you're doing a campaign that's trying to tackle, education, or trying to tackle anything related to conservation, you need a broad spectrum of people in the room, because otherwise it's the viewpoint of one section of society. So as much as you can, and if you can't get it within your team, form partners, form collaborations, reach out to people and say, like, we're trying to do a conservation project. How can we'd love to learn from this group. We'd love to learn faith groups, LGBT, whatever the groups, are, reach out. You might not have that, for various reasons in-house, but there are organizations who can help start you off on that journey. The other one that I think is kind of related to the question asked earlier about communication, like, you might think that your communication is accessible, but it's important to put yourself in another's shoes. So not everybody will be an ecologist. So would your work be understandable by someone who's not trained to a high degree level? So think about that as well. And then research. I don't just mean research in terms of scientific research. I mean spend time actually thinking, what's the problem you want to solve? What people are already working in this space. If you're tackling plastic pollution in a river, maybe the neighboring watershed has someone working on it. You could collaborate, spend time researching policies. I tend to go on about politics a lot because that's part of my job, but like, there's just been the global biodiversity framework. Can you link your projects to that? Because that might open up funding opportunities. It might open up, relationships with the environment ministry, whatever it is, research, and so much more. Those are just a few examples. And I'd love to hear other thoughts on, what's kind of important to research. And then finally, the things that everyone's heard about, when you're crafting your goals and strategy, you have to think SMART, which is specific. You may have noticed that I've kept this same picture here for the last 5 slides, and it's going to be there for another 5, because I really want you to take home that you won't be able to solve everything. You can solve your part and solve it well, and that is your contribution. And that's not a lesser contribution. It's not even a worse contribution. It is your contribution, and it's sometimes the most impactful to do it in your hometown. Don't think I'm going to solve climate change globally, but maybe I can help my town with sea level rise. Whatever it is, think that's your contribution. And that also applies to partnership building. Ask people for specific things. Measurable. set targets, set actual things you can measure, because I'm sure Bailey and Laura, I can only see your faces, but I'm sure you'd agree that sometimes working towards a seemingly never-ending thing can feel draining. It can feel like you can't really measure how you're successful if you're achieving what you want to achieve, because I feel that at times. So set goals and set targets that you can actually measure. Do you want to reach out to 100 schools in your country? Then that's a measurable target. And you can then say, well, I didn't manage to make 100, but I actually got 150. And so then and that's also really helpful for applications. I'm also trying to say that sometimes you need to get funding and things like that. If you can report, lots of funding bodies will ask for evidence. So if you haven't got anything measurable, it might not be achievable. Climate change, biodiversity loss, huge issues. You won't be able to solve them alone, but you can achieve your part of it. So I think the most effective campaigns find a balance between the two. They're not so low ambition that they're kind of meh, but they're not so like broad that it's just, oh my gosh, how are you going to achieve it? Find that balance. Be a bit ambitious. I'm always for ambition, but just be wary of capacity as well. And then relevant. This is a good one. I don't think there is any such thing as a perfect campaign template, in my opinion, because everything is so specific and relevant to what you're working on. But there are some really good examples that you can use and apply and maybe shift to your thing. So I would say never just copy and paste things, because even if, say, you're trying to set up an MPA in Canada, it will be quite a different situation to setting up an MPA in South Africa, perhaps. There's a lot you can learn and there's a lot you can take from it, but never just copy and paste, because there's different societal issues, economic issues, environmental things. Just always think that, because I think there's a tendency sometimes to just pick and drop, and then people go, well, why isn't this working? It worked in somewhere else, but that was a different circumstance. So that's time consuming, but worth it. And then the final one is time bound. You'll have some external deadlines like grant applications, election cycles, conferences, but don't be afraid of setting yourself some deadlines so that you feel like you're working towards something. And that might not be, a deadline of I have to get it done, but maybe it's like I want to get it done by summer. And that's fine, because you have a rough window. Those are the things that I have learned. And like I said, I'm not an expert, but these are what I've learned and what I've asked other people to contribute. So hopefully that was helpful and hopefully that was useful. And apologies for just rattling through, but I really wanted to leave time for questions and answers. And hopefully there are some. And if not, I'm more than happy for people to email or whatever as well to answer things. But thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for listening, and hopefully everyone is still awake and hasn't fallen asleep.
We got some 5:30 a.m.ers in here, and they're still there in the chat, still on with us.
I admire that, because I am the world's oldest 24-year-old who likes going to bed at I told Laura this the other day. I was like, I go to bed at 9 on the dot. I can't stay up late.
Perfect. We love to see it. We love these old, well, you're on the cusp of Gen Z too. So we love these old Gen Zers, old at heart Gen Zers. Thank you so much for that, Joe. I think what you really captured was you hit the entire foundation, right? That is the entirety of setting yourself up for success and sustainable success in whatever you do. Make sure you guys, if you haven't put your question for Joe in the chat, please do so right now. But I have a question for Joe, and I'm taking my time to get it answered. Something that, Joe, I've been able to watch both from the side and sort of alongside of your work, mentoring you as a Youth Advisory Council member, World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council member. And I've seen you do a variety of projects. You strike me as someone who is passionate about a lot of issues. How do you have any advice for young people today, young people watching this who they're bombarded with 11 things that they care about and 11 things that they want to do and help impact? How do you find the space, the time, the energy to narrow those down? How do you streamline that? How do you make sure that you are sustainable in your efforts when maybe you care about a lot of things or have the ability to help impact and work on a lot of projects?
Honestly, I'm still working on it. That's the first step is I'm not going to sit here and say that I've nailed it, because there have been recent times where I have felt overwhelmed with stuff. I think what has helped me a lot is being sort of, I guess, on social media, finding out that other people are working on the projects that, like, for example, I have some close friends who are working on oil fields, like stopping oil fields. Like, as much as I care about it, it's not my passion, it's not my area of expertise, and it's not I'm a nature nerd. Like, that's my focus. But knowing that there's someone doing that work, and knowing that it's someone who is um doing it and well, and I can support, I can share stuff, that to me is like, I'm doing my part. And it goes back to this whole thing about you're not going to be able to tackle the whole, but I have found that useful, of being like, I know people are working on this campaign, so I can take a step back. I'll support them, sharing stuff. I will, if they want a biodiversity perspective, they can reach out and ask, but I know that I don't have to campaign on it. And because I've got my thing, and they'll probably feel the same about some turtle species in thing that they're like, it's interesting, but it's not my passion. So I do think research, go back to that research, finding out what people are doing, it's just a really nice way. And it's a really great way of just knowing that people are working on stuff across the board. But yeah, because like, I quite often get asked about fossil fuel emissions, and I just have to kind of put my hands up and go, not my area. Like, as I really care about, obviously I care about decarbonization, but it's not my active role. And signpost people, don't be afraid to kind of say, this is my area, but I know who you can talk to. I think there is a tendency to want to be an expert on everything, but don't be afraid to kind of say, fossil fuel emissions aren't my specialty, but I care a lot and I know who you should talk to. So yeah, doing a mapping, if you want to use a corporate term, power mapping, whatever you want to call it, like, just find out what people are working on. And that's why initiatives like the Youth Advisory Council, things like that actually bring young people together, are so powerful, because you find out what each person is working on. In my time on the council, like 2 years ago, we had someone who was working on a magazine. We had someone who was working on projects, to set up an ocean carnival in their home city, like things like that. And then I was working mostly on the 30, the global biodiversity framework. And you work out that each of you can complement one another. And if I have a question about media, then I can reach out to Sruthi and be like, hey, I need something, like, or if she's got a question about the new framework, she can reach out to me. And it's, you learn that. Don't try and learn everything. You don't have to know everything. So that was a long answer, but yeah, it's a big one. I think finding out what's happening is such a big thing. And social media is one, joining initiatives, going into, if there's a community event happening, go into the community event. Don't be afraid to just step in, would be my advice. Find out what's happening.
I love that. I also want to add the framework that Joe walks through and through this entire presentation. Use that for yourself in determining what you care about. What is your mission statement? You can use that to help with that as well. I do want to combine, there's a lot of questions on a sort of similar subject of how to start gaining attention for your mission. And there's one in the chat about making sure your voices are heard. So Joe, can you answer, how, once you have this solidified, once you know what you want to do, how do you start getting attention and actually using your power that we all have? Some of us in disproportionate amounts. How do we deal with that as young people?
I think there's two points that I would probably make. Is back to the framework, is teamwork is a big one. Find people to collaborate with, find people who, because each of you will have a different communication strength, I'm going to guess. You'll have people who love public speaking in the example, people who love public speaking, people who love comms, people who love graphic design. Like, so I would find teamwork is a big one, because that really helps, because then you're covering getting your message out in a different, in a load of different ways. And the other thing I would say, it's a slightly different one, but really spend time listening to people. It's quite important. So if you are say if you're doing a campaign in your local area, chat to people about it in the local area. Don't just assume that what you're putting out there is the best material. And don't be afraid to, if you're trying something and it's not cutting through, don't be afraid to kind of go, okay, this isn't working. I need to try something different. So it's a lot of learning as well. I wish I could give like a very solid answer of like, this is what you need to do. You need to do Instagram, Twitter, but it is very dependent on the situation and being ready to learn and unlearn, relearn what's the best communication methods. And within that, it's, you know, what's the language that you're using? Those are questions that are going to come up a lot. And I think, well, there was a question about confidence, which I think is kind of related, is be confident that if your sort of intention is good, say if you're setting up this MPA project, people will, they might object, you know, they might push back, but that's because the communication hasn't translated properly. Like, it might not be a rejection, it might just be so it's kind of knowing that what you're doing is okay, and just being ready to say, okay, well, that didn't work. I went to a meeting and I got thrown fish thrown at me. That's never happened to me, but I'm assuming some people have happened. But it's like, okay, I'll try something different. Maybe I need to actually find a member of the community or the industry that is sympathetic to my cause. So yeah, confidence is a big thing, and that does come from, I think everyone thinks that confidence is being able to just like speak out loud, when really confidence is having quiet confidence to go into a meeting, sit there and listen in an unfriendly environment. Like, you could be going into a fishing industry meeting that they're talking about how much they hate the MPA, but just having a bit of confidence to say, okay, I'm going to listen. And, you know, there are other issues as well, but that's confidence. And the confidence to know that what you're doing is right and that you are learning from it as well.
I love that. Do you have time for one more, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay. I do want to kind of combine two, since I think one question in particular lends itself to answering another one. So there's one question in the chat, and I know that if you follow Joe on Instagram, he's wonderful at doing this, but shouting out some of your favorite organizations that you would recommend people learn about, get involved with. And then that maybe might answer, there's another question in the Q&A box that says, what are the best ways to find people, you know, like-minded young change makers? And honestly, joining organizations has been my way of finding, I mean, friends like you and Laura. So maybe answering that two-part, you know, shouting out some organizations that you want people to put on their radars, and then maybe some that are wonderful for young people to get involved with, you know, if they want to, you know, bring this community, you know, into their communities.
Yeah. In terms of organizations, I'm of course going to shout out World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council. That was a real game changer for me personally, like in the kind of realizing that I've always been an ocean person, but it was nice to feel like I could actually make a difference. I'd kind of been a bit like, what am I going to do? So I would shout that out, and I'm sure applications will open at some point soon. So I would really recommend that. Just the chance to meet people from around the world working, you know, to protect our great blue planet, and realizing that the currents that I'm putting, you know, if something falls in here, I could be in Canada by tomorrow, like that sort of thing. I think that's great. Reserva has been a big part of my life, probably the big part of my life for the last 3 years, since I joined as a volunteer. So we're growing and we're changing, so that's a great thing to get involved. There are bigger ones as well. Like if you're interested in policy, I really recommend Gibbon, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. They have been so helpful. So they're the youth constituency to the Biodiversity Convention. So if you're ever interested in policy, then they are a great organization to join. And on that note, each UN convention will have some form of youth constituency. So look out for those as well, because like UNEP has CYMG, UNEP, yeah, Children and Youth Major Group, great people. UNFCCC, Climate Change, has Youngo. All of them have some form of youth constituency. Youth for Nature is another one. UK Youth for Nature is a separate organization, but we're based in the UK, but there is an international organization called Youth for Nature, who are also more about education, getting people into spaces. And there's so many. Coalition Wild would be a third. They focus very much on mentorship, and an excellent organization. And I'm sure I have forgotten hundreds that I would love to recommend. So I will probably send over Laura a list of things as well. In general, the best way to get involved, like from a my experience with social media, but I know in some countries that's not a possibility, and for different reasons. So in that case, I'm not sure on the best way, but I know there will be ways, and it might be a case of looking out for email groups. Quite often they'll have email groups, so that might be one. And look out for flyers. You might even just see like a flyer in your hometown. Go to the event. Yeah, I can only speak from mine that social media has been big, but of course I know not everyone is on social media. So in that case, we'll find out. Please let me know as well if anybody in the listening has had experience of finding things through other means. Would love to hear that, because I know how to find local things and I know how to find international through social media. Local is through like word of mouth, etc. But love to hear experience about that from other people as well.
Yeah. Also going, back to the start of Joe's presentation, start with the place that you care about. So, if diving is a passion, right? Like, and is driving your conservation why, start there, join a diving club. They start to grow in terms of members, and you can meet more people that way, but also you'll start to see the work that they're doing, and that can inspire your work. You can get involved, start with the passion, right? Like, and start where that passion lives. Like Joe said, he's a nature nerd. Start out in nature, right? Get out there, say hello, right? And sometimes that's not always accessible if you're passionate about things that maybe aren't in your own backyard. But start in those ways, and obviously tell us, right? Like, we're still all figuring it out as we go. So did you have something else to add too, Joe?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, in terms of like find your passion, that really contributes to making things sustainable. It can be so hard to tackle things if it's not like what you're really passionate, because at the end of the day, passion is what drives a lot of this. And I think the more we can lend into that, the more we'll be sustainable in this movement. But there's something else I was going to say, but it slipped my mind, because you mentioned a really good point. That's what I was going to say. Yes, everybody has a platform. That was what I was going to say. So even if you're in school with no social media, you have 30 classmates, or you have 100 people in the school. Set up an environmental SOC, set up a society of some description. If primary school, secondary school, university, like universities quite often have support to help you set up societies if you access it. So look up your I was a student union in the UK. I don't know what it's called around the world, but something similar. There'll be those people who will help you set up a society, and you'll be surprised how many people come out of the woodwork once you set up a society. So don't always think social media is far away. Whatever your community is, there is somewhere you can enact change, and somewhere that people can come together. So definitely schools are a great one. Set up an eco club, set up a ocean loving society, or whatever you want to call it. Like, set them up, because people will love that, and that's a legacy, and that's something that you can change. And teachers generally love it as well, because it's like, they're like, wow, we've got such enthusiastic students. So they are quite often happy to support things like that as well.
That's awesome. Joe, thank you. In listening to this presentation, the thing I kept thinking in my brain was, man, I wish I would have had this as like a 15, 16-year-old advocate, right? When I just cared about everything and I just wasn't sure how to do it. And thank you for taking the time to put this together so succinctly, but in a way that can really be translated across the board, no matter what you care about. I put that earlier in the chat, be it environmental issues, be it social justice issues, which often live at an intersection in a lot of ways. Like, you can translate any of this to the things you guys care about and be an effective organizer, which is what we need now more than ever, is effective organizing to help make this planet a safe and abundant place for all of us. So thank you, Joe, for taking the time to do this, sharing your wisdoms and thought. And thank you all for joining us. I know Laura has a couple things to wrap up with, but something that's really important is that you guys get this. You didn't have to like scribble in like a notebook to try and remember all of the good nuggets of wisdom that Joe has shared with us. You get this, and you get to reference this and share with your friends and family, you know, who this also might be helpful for. So just keep that in mind. You get to take all of this knowledge with you and share it. And I know that I will be using it. So over to Laura for last minute updates and news.
Yeah, so again, ditto to Bailey. Thank you so much, Joe, for this amazing presentation. I feel like I want to go back and rewatch the recording in like a couple of days from now to like really sit with it and remember all the things that we've talked about. But yes, I do want to just have some things in our announcements here. I just sent the registration link for next week, session 3. That will be social media and communications, where we're going to be talking a lot about quite a few things that we touched on today, a little bit more in depth about the communication side of things and the networking, social media side of things. And then we also had another question in the Q&A that was asking about just general language accessibility. So we are planning to have a couple of volunteers work with us to get our advocacy training sessions translated into a couple of different languages. And we also hope to have the slides available in different languages as well. So keep an eye out for that, hopefully coming in a couple of weeks, likely after World Ocean Day, just because we are a month out from Monday, which is crazy for World Ocean Day, and we're really excited. So on that note, we do have a couple of World Ocean Day resources available as well, including our brand new 2023 social media and event planning toolkits. Those are available to download off of the World Ocean Day website, in addition to our conservation action focus of 2023, which is essentially following through on 30 by 30. And we would love to hear from you. We have a 30 by 30 survey and another 30 by 30 action guide that you can download as well. And my last announcement that Joe also touched on, we have our current World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council term almost coming to an end, being this close to World Ocean Day, and we will have those applications open sometime around, we don't have an exact date set yet, but we will have it sometime around late June or early July. So please be sure to visit. I just sent the link in the chat. I'm going to send it one more time, theoceanproject.org. And if you would like to send me an email as well, I'm also going to put that in the chat here. If you have any questions about advocacy training, if you have any questions about the Youth Advisory Council, if you have any questions about World Ocean Day or anything about our youth initiative at all, please feel free to send me a message. I'm really happy to be a sounding board for you all as well. And on that note, thank you all so much for joining us. I really do hope that you're able to join us for session 3 next week on the 13th of May. And I hope you all have a really wonderful rest of your night. For those of you who joined us super late at night or early in the morning, beautiful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, etc. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Bailey, and hope to see you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your day.